Hey there, Faithful Politics family. Will Wright here. I've got something special to share with you. Something we've been working on for the past year. It's an audio narrative series called Heavenly Homeland that dives deep into the topic of Christian nationalism, which is something that's been making the headlines and stirring lots of conversations in homes, churches, and political circles. I'll be back in a bit to tell you more about the details, but I wanted to at least pique your interest if I could. So in the meantime, hope you're doing amazing and enjoy the rest of the show.
There are a number of really, really important distinctions. One is Trump was repeatedly asked, do you have any classified documents? And the answer was always no. And the FBI and Department of Justice were getting enough counter information that they ordered a raid. Well, it wasn't really exactly a raid, but, they wore nice suit coats and knocked on the front door and said, hey, here's a subpoena for your troubles.
Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and viewers. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, I'm your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. How's it going, Josh?
Doing well, thanks.
And this week, we have returning to us Professor Robert Deitz, who's a professor, former intelligence officer, served as senior counsel to the director of CIA and general counsel of National Security Agency, and has been on the show, actually, before to talk about classified items, specifically with regard to Trump. But now we've asked that he return to give us his hot takes on the special counsel Robert Hur's report on the Biden classified documents case. So welcome back to the show, Robert.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And shortly before our discussion, I looked you up under Rate My Professor. I don't know if you're familiar with this website, but they score professors on a 5-point Likert scale. So any guesses on how you fare?
I assume I did pretty well.
Yes. According to the Rate My Professor website, Robert Deitz is a 5 out of 5.
Oh. Well,
there you go. You're a 5 out of 5 in my book too, Robert.
Well, thank you.
Just so you know.
All right. So Biden classified documents case. Last time we spoke, we talked about the Trump classified document case. And as expected with the Biden one, it's like everybody's gone into their respective corners. No surprise there.
Yeah.
The left is saying that Biden's exonerated. The right are calling for his cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment. So I'd love to get your big takeaway, and then we'll kind of zero in on a couple specific sections.
Yeah, sure. This kind of reminds me of you win the battle and lose the war. I think the outcome was quite correct. If you compare the Trump conduct with the Biden conduct, it is radically different. When presidents leave office, vice presidents leave office, it's not like they sit there and look at each paper they're putting in boxes. That's done by aides. And so that there's no question that inevitably there are going to be classified documents find their way in these big documents boxes. So the outcome, I think, was quite right. So he did win the battle. With respect to losing the war, the prosecutor Hur was not exactly complimentary on Mr. Biden's mental acuity. And as a result, you're getting a lot of pushback from the White House. And there was an op-ed by a Washington Post reporter who thinks this is just an incredible hatchet job by a politician. That is her. So, I mean, that part I know nothing about. I know nothing about Her's politics. He is a person I've never met. But there's no doubt that report has really harmed Biden.
Yeah, I think it really has. I've heard things about his mental acuity right throughout the years, and I've been listening to C-SPAN and all the back and forth from all these different, panels that are saying, is Biden really, is he losing this? Is what's going on here? Why are there so many issues here with his mental acuity? So Can you kind of talk us through, like, I mean, obviously it's important a president has mental acuity, but yet what exactly did this report say? How did it cast aspersions on his mental acuity, and what's the likelihood, do you think? I mean, what's the likelihood that this was politically motivated, as the White House is trying to say they're just trying to, this person's trying to get a better job in the new president's cabinet in the next term or something like that? I've heard that thrown around. So what do you think? Yeah,
I mean, you're raising a couple of very interesting points. First, I'm reluctant to claim that anybody working at DOJ has a political agenda. I have enormous respect for the lawyers at DOJ. I worked with them over many years, and I thought they were straight shooters. Her, as you understand, had to explain why he's recommending not to prosecute. He said that these were all intentional acts. And so how the hell do you explain? Well, I'm sorry. How do you explain we're not prosecuting? And so he had to explain, he put in language akin to the jury would find him to be a nice, an older gentleman with sort of a doddering old gentleman, kind of like Uncle Leo in the Seinfeld show, who was stealing AAA batteries. What are they going to do? Prosecute an old man who can't remember anything? But I think that was a necessary component to explain why the Trump situation is very different from the Biden situation. Bear in mind that while Biden may be identified as a doddering old man, Trump's under criminal indictment. And as I mentioned last summer when we were chatting, I believe that a conviction almost inevitably has to carry a jail sentence.
Yeah. So I guess walk us through maybe your experience with reports like this. I mean, with a lot of the excess commentary specifically focused on, his mental state of mind or whatnot. Like, is that normal, or did he put that in there just as sort of like evidence on why we're not prosecuting, this case?
I think he had to put stuff akin to that in there because after all, these were classified documents in Biden's house, in his garage, along with a lot of, garden equipment and such. There was a guy at NSA who was prosecuted and went to jail for keeping NSA documents in his garage. And so to try to prevent this from looking like, okay, Republicans get hosed, Democrats don't, he had to explain why he wasn't going further with the prosecution. So I think it was a necessary part. But in Washington, there's nothing that is ever not political. And we're seeing an example. We're seeing an example of that.
Yeah, and so one of the main elements of the report that a lot of people are kind of coalescing around is like this line of willfully retained, and kind of using that as the cudgel to beat him up. So can you maybe like unpack what does that mean? Does it carry any weight? What should we make of it?
Yeah, that's often puzzling in the law. I can't remember, Will, did I send you that great Holmes quote? Oliver Holmes had a wonderful quote. Even a dog knows the difference between being stumbled over and being kicked, which I think is just remarkable. And he was making a very important point that in the law business, to be convicted of a crime, you have to have intended to do it, not intended to do wrong, but you had to have intended to, I take a cup and throw it on the ground. That's willful. I pick up a cup and it slips through my fingers. That's not willful. So it's clear that Mr. Biden had these documents and it was willful. He ended up chatting with his ghostwriter about documents, including, top secret, highly classified stuff.
So the highly classified stuff. So something I keep hearing is something along these lines. Like Biden said something about, hey, I wanted to keep some things for posterity's sake, some, conversation or personal letter he had with, President Obama. And he was just kind of keeping it, he said, for posterity's sake. And I keep hearing his cabinet, they're trying to say, no, his mental acuity is great. These documents everyone's blowing this out of proportion. They're not answering any of the questions straight. So what kinds of documents are we actually talking about here? And how is it is it just letters, personal notes between him and Obama saying, hey, I see you, Barack, and you look great in your coat today. And that's highly classified because it's privileged speech. What are we talking about here?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Will again to tell you about Heavenly Homeland, which is an ambitious project that draws from the past 4 years of our podcast to tell the story about Christian nationalism in 5 informative episodes. The episodes in the Heavenly Homeland series will address the belief that America was founded as a Christian nation, the separation of church and state, using the Bible as a tool of oppression, why evangelicals love Trump, and finally, an episode showing why not all Christians are Christian nationalists. We have over 24 experts from the world of academia, theology, constitutional law, mental health professionals, and so many more. The first episode airs on March 3rd, which happens to be the date Lemon v. Chrisman was heard at the Supreme Court. And if you're wondering what that is, well, wait till episode 2. You'll learn all about it. The remaining episodes are going to air every Saturday after that. This documentary is an invitation to explore, to understand, and to engage in a conversation that's more important now than ever. Whether you're a devout follower, a concerned citizen, or somewhere in between, there's something in this story for you. So if you haven't already, go ahead and smash that subscribe button on your podcast platform. It's right there. Just press it so you can make sure that you don't miss it when it comes out. Let's embark on this journey together, equipped with knowledge, empathy, and a willingness to listen to the myriad voices that make up this great nation of ours. Stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, make sure to keep your conversations not right, not left, but up. And let's keep bridging the gap between faith and politics with an open heart and an open mind. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the show.
These are not favorite cookie recipes. There are, I, of course, you surely don't think that I broke into Biden's garage and looked through them myself. So what I'm going to do is speculate. But I would speculate that some of the intel had to do with what other world leaders were saying or thinking, and it was acquired through very sophisticated electronic means. I would speculate, and again, just raw speculation, that these included documents involving Russian order of battle. I'm going, of course, to the other extreme, but the notion that there are documents that say, "Happy birthday, Bill, love Obama," is ridiculous. Those things don't get TSI classifications, and those classifications are not added lightly. They mean something.
Yeah.
And by the way, in trial, you don't get the chance to challenge the classification.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you're hosed.
So, I mean, some of what I picked up from reading the report was Biden kept notes in a notebook. Some of the notes were classified, some weren't, and I can just imagine myself in that position. I'm in a top secret briefing talking about the president's daily briefing or what have you, and I'm writing notes, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot, I got to grab milk or something on the way home, so then I write, okay, grab milk or buy flowers, for my wife.
Right.
like how does the notes like in a vice president's notebook like go through the classification process? I mean, I figured like a person in that role is just jotting down notes on everything, and some of it may be classified and some may not.
Sure. Look, bear in mind, I loved your analogy about stopping by the 7-Eleven to pick up a quart of milk. Vice presidents and presidents don't stop by 7-Eleven to pick up a quart of milk. That's why God invented gophers. And presidents and vice presidents, unlike the rest of us, when they have highly classified documents, they can take them to their houses. Their houses are viewed effectively as SCIFs. Remember, we've talked about SCIFs in the past. And so, when he's taking notes, he wouldn't even have to identify them as top secret because he's in a SCIF, either at work or when he's driven to his house. When I was in that situation, and I rarely marked my own notes as top secret, but those notebooks never left my place of work. I never took them home with me.
Interesting. So how much does intent play with decision to not prosecute?
Well, again, for legal purposes, he intended to do what he did, and you'll see in the executive summary, this was willful. But again, they're obligated to make a prosecutorial determination, and the prosecutor said, "Nah, look, the odds are very high that the jury's going to look at this doddering old man who can't remember when his son died." And now, of course, Biden's people and Biden are vociferously disputing that characterization. But that was the sole basis, so far as I can tell, for that decision.
So, like, if you're thinking about Biden forgetting when his son died, okay, something along those lines, which is, it feels like that's a major thing. Like, how is it that a question like that, again, starts to play in, which seems like a very personal question? How would a question like that even come up? Number one, and I know you weren't there, but why in a legal prosecution or investigation of prosecution? Why in this investigation? Why would they be asking questions like that?
Well, yeah.
And then how come answers like that then bear on his ability to perform in other areas?
Yeah, good question. My assumption, and given the fact that he spoke for, I think, 5 hours over a couple of days, it sounds like this was a very far-reaching deposition. And in most depositions, I mean, most is an overstatement, but certainly often in depositions, you're looking for for not just the specific facts that form the crux of the investigation, but all the sort of stuff surrounding those facts. And I mean, I know, for example, one of the first things I would ask a person when I was deposing him was, "Are you under any medication?" Because I wanted to know if that person was, I didn't want to go to trial and then have this person say, "Oh, by the way, I was totally drunk when I gave that deposition." So I'd always ask, "Are you on any medication that would interfere with your answering questions? Are you under any drugs, blah, blah, blah." And then I think I'm guessing from the report that I read that Her was getting into sort of collateral stuff of, involving his life at the time. Would things going on in his personal life at the time affect what was going on with these classified documents? So that's how those issues arise. And then once you get, I'm speculating, but once he was getting indications that Trump may have some memory problems, then he really pursued that by asking those questions. When were you vice president? When did your son die? And so forth.
So it's like he noticed something. Maybe. And then once you notice, right? So once you notice something, then you can kind of legally go down that.
Absolutely.
You go down that, just like what police would do in an interview with someone, That kind of idea?
Yep.
Okay, so
bear in mind, this was a criminal investigation. This wasn't a good housekeeping inquiry on how the vice president keeps and stores his linens at the vice president's house. This is a criminal investigation. And so it was in his interest, hers interest, but also in Biden's interest to put your best foot forward to explain why you shouldn't be prosecuted.
So, like, the idea here, just so I'm getting, this is really helpful, just so I'm getting this straight in my mind. We got a criminal investigation going on. So let's say I'm here and I got, I don't know, the IRS or someone's coming over to my house. I'm not just going to be treating it lightly. Oh, I don't know, maybe sometime, maybe could have happened there. I want to be like, and the idea is that he should have known, and in this kind of environment, for him to answer the way he did, that was what was so concerning.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, Biden was briefed by his own lawyers. I know when I, was prepping clients to be deposed, I would go through all the questions that they were likely to ask, and I'd be really rough about it. I wasn't being nice because I wanted them to get the feel of what it's like to have hostile questioning. And so I suspect that Biden was briefed to a fairly well, and still to have those problems is troubling. Now, there is an irony here that we've got two effectively 80-year-olds running for president, and both hose up public appearances left and right. Now, according to the opinion polls, the people seem to give Trump a free pass, but with Biden, they don't.
Yeah,
unclear to me why, but that's politics.
It's almost like it's better to say crazy stuff in your old age than to misremember stuff.
Yeah.
For some.
No, I'm gradually experiencing that myself. That's why I listen to shows like yours.
Is it because you won't remember you doing the show?
I'll deny I even know you guys.
It's okay.
Now that's spoken like a true CIA lawyer. I love that.
So Robert, one of the biggest things that a lot of people that I talk to, specifically like Trump voters, are, why aren't they, prosecuting Biden, but they're doing it for Trump? And I feel like I feel pretty okay answering that question, but a lot of it is just like, well, read the report, and nobody's going to read the report because nobody has that kind of time or interest or passion in knowing what the truth is. So maybe you can kind of help explain, like, what are some of the fundamental big picture things that really separate, the Jack Smith prosecution from the Robert Hur's prosecution?
Sure. There are a number of really, really important distinctions. One is Trump was repeatedly asked, do you have any classified documents? And the answer was always no. And the FBI and Department of Justice were getting enough counter information that they ordered a raid. Well, it wasn't really exactly a raid, but they wore nice suit coats and knocked on the front door and said, "Hey, here's a subpoena for your troubles." And so that was the first thing, the lack of cooperation. Biden, in contrast, said, "Yeah, you all come on over here and search anything you want." That suggests that you really didn't want to do wrong. And if there is a wrong here, let's get it corrected. That's point one. Point two, you've seen the pictures of the way these classified documents in Mar-a-Lago were handled. They were shoved into a bathroom. There was a pile of them in a hallway where the door was open. Anybody walking down the hallway could look in. I know if I were a member of Mar-a-Lago, not bloody likely, by the way. But I know that if I were a member and I looked in walking down a hall open and a door was open showing candy stripers, I'd go in and pull them out and look at them. I mean, isn't it akin to when you go to somebody's house and you're in the bathroom, do you never open the drug door?
Yes.
Of course you do. Don't even bother lying.
I can neither recollect nor recall ever doing such a thing.
Of course not. Of course not.
You know, one of the things that comes out, Robert, in this is like, oh, well, there are best practices versus legal guidelines, and legal, not even guidelines, legal, like actual law, which what are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with they didn't do the best practices, or are we dealing with, obviously, I mean, you're saying criminal investigation, so there's some law, specifically said broken.
Absolutely.
What do we say to the best guidelines?
No,
what do we say to the best
these are
guidelines
laws.
Argument?
You can't, when you've got top secret clearance, you are informed repeatedly what that means, and among other things, it means you can't take the documents out of the skiff. You can't take them home with you. Now, again, for a president and vice president, that gets to be a little slippery, because their homes, as official homes, are skiffs. And so they're able to take documents from their office into the car, being driven by somebody, to their houses. But nonetheless, once your term as president or vice president is over, you can't say, "Oh boy, this is an intriguing document. I'd like to keep this for my memoirs," or that was a nice bon mot from Putin. Let me take that document. You just can't do that, and everybody knows that. Everybody who's got a security clearance knows that.
I mean, my wife was saying, look, she's like, we get trained. We go through hours and hours and hours of training on that. We can't say anything or answer any questions during the standards of learning SOLs, right?
Right.
You can't say anything. She's like, how is it that I get this much training and then we could go to a president and say that they can claim ignorance or they didn't know or accident or
your
right?
Wife
That's
is dead right. Your wife is dead right. We all get, every time anybody who gets a security clearance has some drone explaining all the ins and outs of having that security clearance and what is likely to happen to you if you violate it. And it's just, I mean, again,
yes.
You look at the prosecutions of NSA or CIA types. The guy who recently provided a whole boatload of documents to Assange, he was convicted and has gotten a very stiff jail sentence. And it's, it's vital for the national security. I mean, these aren't trivial secrets. I mean, these aren't the types of things that would appear on TMZ.
Yeah, make that case for us. Yeah, I mean, even more if you would like, almost like bringing out the seriousness, because it feels like it's all just like a joke. It feels like it's just like a media like joke, like but that's not what I'm hearing, and that's not what is reality.
No, it's not a joke. I mean, I think I mentioned in a prior meeting with you all, but again, because of my age, my memory isn't all that great. When classified information is provided, it comes on a sheet of paper, normally 8.5 by 11, and on the top are all kinds of abbreviations and letters and numbers and so on. I assume those are filing numbers. I've never bothered to ask. But then below that, it says something like a source who has provided accurate information for the last 10 years says the following. Then there's a dotted line across the document. And that line is called above the tear line, below the tear line. Often what's above the tear line is actually far more serious a secret than what's below the tear line. I mean, intelligence has a sell-by period. Stuff just isn't a secret forever and ever. Amen. But what may be immortal is a path by which you obtain that information. And that's the kind of stuff that could appear in these top secret documents because he is getting above and below the tear line. You know, if we discover, I'm using we very loosely here, if the Fibbies or NSA or somebody finds out that there may be a terrorist attack in Atlanta, they'll provide the below the tear line information to Sheriff Bubba. They're not going to provide the above the tear line stuff to Sheriff Bubba. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. You know, so I want to go back to the Trump thing again because the report went out of its way to delineate the difference between Biden's classified stuff and Trump's stuff, and even like included like a bit of a history lesson, which I had no idea about, like Reagan and Carter, like all these other instances. Like what did that actually add to the report? Because my reading, and obviously I'm not a legal person, but like in my reading of it, it's almost like he's telling himself why he shouldn't prosecute, but I'm sure that's probably not right.
No, look, some of any legal writing is persuading yourself. If you can't persuade yourself, you're going to have a heck of a time persuading others. No, I think you're raising an important point. Republicans are always, particularly MAGA folk, are always going to say, wait a minute, you're prosecuting Trump. Why aren't you prosecuting Biden? You know that's what's going to happen. And Hearst certainly knew that that's what was going to happen. And so what he was trying to do was explain, why am I not recommending prosecution versus the Trump indictment? And, you know, and you can see why that, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you can certainly see why that on its face would raise an odor. And so what he was doing, and that's why I don't take the White House's view that this was simply a hatchet job. He had to really persuade the American people why these two cases are so different.
Like, do you think that, you know, when we get to the point where Jack Smith is writing his final report, that he'll include something about Biden?
No, because Jack Smith, I'm not sure he'll write a final report. He's going to trial.
Yeah, that's true.
So the jury verdict will be the final report.
I keep thinking about how important it is that when someone like me in the public, right? I don't know. I don't understand how these depositions work, right? I've never been in a deposition personally. Most of the people voting out there have not been in a deposition personally. How important do you feel like it is that this report is taken, about Biden, is taken seriously, and that it's basically disseminated and given the results to the American public and voters? And does it need any explanation with it? Because what you're telling me, it makes so much more sense than what I hear on C-SPAN and Fox News, and all I hear is just sound bites. It feels like on there, and I don't know.
I think it's very important, and I think in a couple of different ways. One is, I think it is important to distinguish Biden's conduct with Trump's, but beyond that, I think is a trumpet call to think about Biden's mental acuity. He wouldn't be the first. You may recall from your high school civics lesson, Woodrow Wilson. He had, I guess it was a stroke, and for most of his second term, the decisions were being made by his wife and I think his name was Colonel House. And the fact is that, look, just like with Supreme Court justices, presidents can get away with really not doing much of anything. Their speeches are going to be written for them. The ceremonial events of signing legislation and so forth. I mean, none of that stuff you could train a pet puppy to do. And clearly the Democrats are going, and the Republicans were both, they're both dealing with two old men. And, I'm not an ageist since I'm their same age.
Right.
After all, why else am I on this show? This is the mental acuity is a serious issue. It astonishes me that a nation of 350 million people, we can't find two people below the age of 80.
Astonishes me as well.
For office. I mean, God, you'd think this was Spain with Franco.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I was joking with somebody recently. I was like, I just want to vote for somebody that's like under 70 and has not had a special counsel appointed to investigate them. I was like I feel like that should be a pretty large.
That's too high of a bar, dude. That bar is too high.
Ah, geez. In the report also the special counsel Herr was writing about Biden's time in government.
Yep.
And basically was alluding to the fact that this guy has been around secret materials for his whole life. There's a good chance he could not have known, that the notebook with, the coordinates where they were going to go get Osama, were located. So how convincing of an argument is that? And, you've been around classified documents your whole life. Like, is it easy to just become desensitized to the fact that something's classified?
On a scale of 0 to 10, that defense ranks as 0. Every one of these documents we're talking about, on every page, not just the cover, but on every page, top secret code word. So, no, you have to work really hard not to recognize that.
Interesting. So,
and by the way, just what you mentioned the length of time Biden's been in the public eye. He's always come out with malapropisms and misstatements. Look, I've been in Washington my whole career, and I remember, when he was the senator from Delaware going home every night or a couple times a week, he was always known as a bit of a doofus. To be blunt, and this is and so it's not surprising that he is that his doofusness has continued. Now, whether that's slipped into mental acuity, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that both he and Trump continually hose up people's names.
Yeah, it's so true. If Nikki Haley had only called the National Guard on January 6th, who knows?
Right. Who knows what would have happened? They said, "Who the hell are you?"
I want to talk a little bit about Biden's ghostwriter, because reading the report, I gotta admit, I felt a little bad for the person, because
and why was that?
Well, because
it's paid enough.
No, it was like it seemed like he just got mixed in or rolled into something that he had no idea what he was getting into. I'm sure he's getting paid lots of money and he'll forget it all. But the report mentioned how he, when he heard about this investigation, that he deleted a bunch of stuff off his computer.
Right. So that doesn't show.
That's not good.
That doesn't show a guilty mind, does it?
No, yes, it does show, but it's one of those how is it that he's not, being prosecuted when, he literally he knew that he had classified stuff on his computer and then he deleted it. How was that not?
Yeah. Let me take a shot at answering that. There are kind of two possible answers, and I'm not sure which is right, or if either of them is right. He doesn't have a relationship with the federal government with respect to classified documents. And I think it's a serious question whether if a person who's got clearance hands a person who doesn't have clearance, whether that recipient is actually violating the law. I think it's doubtful. But set that aside for a minute. I think the idea was that he was acting in good faith. And yes, he destroyed the tapes, but he apparently kept a very accurate log of what's on them. So, and look, it's worth reminding ourselves that, as the kids say these days, let's be real. You're going to prosecute the ghostwriter and not the principal? What the heck? That's got to look good in the theater.
I mean, people like on the left would say, well, that's kind of what they're doing with like the January 6th stuff, right? Like they're prosecuting all these people that were, peacefully protesting or touring the Capitol.
Right.
Dude, they were touring the Capitol, obviously. Well, that's what the videos that what's his freaking name said. I don't even remember the guy's name. Yeah. Hannity. Mm-hmm. And no, Hannity, is it Hannity? I don't remember.
Yeah.
One of those clowns. That's what they said, dude, that they were letting everybody in. This is so, what this brings to me is it really highlights the disparity to me between people and in those positions of power and for lack of a better term, the regular peons like the rest of us. For instance, we've had Reality Winner on this show who, what was it, 5 years, 10 years? How long did she get? 5 years in jail for having, probably a fraction of the documents or whatever it was that either of these presidents have. Now, what, and I'm asking for your personal and legal opinion, whatever mix thereof. When you have someone with that kind of power, obviously they can't be, can they just be treated like me? I know no one is supposed to be above the law, and I get that. And yet at the same time, they have access to things that I don't have access to. They have understandings of things that I don't. They make decisions that are way more impactful and way more people than I do. What's kind of the balance there, do you think? Have you seen that balance done well and struck well in your time in Washington? That's
a great question. That question of equal justice under the law has been around, I guess, forever. I remember, this is before your time, but I remember when the Miranda case was decided. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right, cops acted as though the world were about to end. But in fact, well-to-do people, well-educated people had always known those rights. And when they were arrested, they wouldn't say anything. They'd call their lawyer. So what the Warren Court was saying was, hey, wait a minute. We know that this class of people does this already. Wouldn't it be a matter of fairness under the Constitution that everybody gets told about these rights? So, this issue has been around forever. I think that Trump is being treated the way he's being treated just because he was so arrogant and blithe about dismissing the request for those documents. Look, this is true of Trump so often. He's constantly shooting himself in the foot. If he had said, yeah, it turns out I do have some documents, why don't you all come on down here and you can, go through all my stuff and take the stuff that's classified, this case wouldn't exist. But it's just, his spending a career telling people to, buzz off, that ultimately he gets indicted.
Yeah. There's a part in the report. It's in the executive summary.
Of course. Yeah, because I was waiting for you to tell me you had read all 336 pages along with the exhibits.
I didn't actually.
I didn't read the exhibits, but I read enough about Reagan and Carter to be an expert and to write their autobiographies. But
you'd be surprised about what Will reads.
So in this quote it says, but addressing those risks through criminal charges, the only means available to this the only means available to this office is not the proper remedy here. And I was reading that wondering if that's like an implication that yeah, sure, we can't prosecute him, but, there's things that you folks reading this can do. Like, I don't know if that's just regular language that gets put in there, or if that's sort of a broader implication that we can't do anything here, but maybe you guys can.
No, I'm sorry. What are you referring? You're saying when they discuss Reagan and Carter and others?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Like so in the executive summary, Robert Hurd talks about why he's not prosecuting.
Yes,
and he says, but addressing those risks through criminal charges, the only means available to this office.
Oh, right.
He's basically saying it's not the proper remedy.
Right. Now I'm with you. Mm-hmm. So what's the question?
So the question is, like, is that just normal, like, template language, or
no? Again, people are going to say, "Wait a minute, why aren't you prosecuting this guy? You admit you have a tool at your disposal. Why aren't you using that tool?" And again, that's why as I said earlier, I totally disagree with the White House. They really want to have their cake and eat it too. They don't want a prosecution, but they want to say, "Oh, Biden's sharp as a tack." Well, that's true. Why aren't you prosecuting him?
Right.
That's true. And to the point of a lot of, like, liberals saying, that he's been exonerated. Is that it? That's not inaccurate. Okay.
He's not exonerated. Good grief. No. He's not been exonerated. He's not being prosecuted.
That's
because he's a dithering old man.
Yeah.
He's Uncle Leo.
He's Uncle Leo, dude, stealing the batteries.
President Leo.
Well, I mean, because it's like, I don't know. I mean, I voted for Biden, sure, but if I had the choice to vote for somebody younger and not, under special counsel investigation, like, I'd probably vote for that person. But
sure.
But it's like, when the Mueller report came out, a lot of people on the right are like, yeah, see, Trump's exonerated. And I'm like, no, he's not. Like, read the report.
No.
People just take whatever they want.
A person wins in a criminal jury trial. And he said, the jury found me innocent. No, the jury didn't find you innocent. The jury found you not guilty. That's a horse of a very different color.
So... Actually, on that, and then I have another question. What is the difference between innocent and not guilty? Help us understand that for the regular people who all we do is watch Cold Case, and that's the only time we ever get any of this, any understanding of what's happening. What do you mean by that?
In criminal cases, juries or judges, if they're the fact finder, must find a person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a pretty high standard. And by the way, sometimes people say beyond all reasonable doubt. No, beyond reasonable doubt. So there's still some flex space in there. But that's the standard. And if a jury finds you not guilty, they may find you not guilty because you're as innocent as a lamb. But the odds are overwhelming that they're finding you not guilty because the evidence just wasn't as persuasive as the jury thought it needed in order to convict. So being found not guilty is by no means exoneration. Good grief.
So, I mean, that's a really, really, really important point that I think, Robert, many, many people do not follow that line of reasoning that I know. When someone's, hey, I've been exonerated,
right,
or I've been found not guilty. But what I'm hearing you say, that simply has to do with the evidence they had couldn't make an airtight case or something, like couldn't bring it to that place where there was no reason, like it was beyond a reasonable doubt, like you said.
Absolutely. But, you find this kind of language all the time in Washington. I've spent my whole career here, and there are the number of these expressions that I find incredibly amusing, or at the same time making me want to tear my hair out. One of my favorites is a politician is, under a cloud and leaves office, and he says, "I'm looking forward to spending more time with my family." Do you think there's a single spouse out there who's glad that his or her husband is going to want more time with him? Do you know anybody who's been married longer than 2 weeks who wants to spend more time with a spouse?
Man, that's good. That's good. That'll preach. You just gave me my sermon for this weekend.
Well, I've been reluctant to say this for obvious reasons, but my father was a minister as well.
Hey, it's all right. I love that. I want to real quick talk about the 25th Amendment, because people sometimes they know the first. If they're conservative, they know the second. That's for sure. They're going to say, "I know the second. Give me my guns," and probably misinterpret that. What is the 25th Amendment? Why are some Republicans calling it to be invoked? What would that even mean if it was?
The 25th
what are we
Amendment
talking about
deals
here?
with a president who's incapacitated. And incapacitated can mean this, this arose during Reagan. Incapacitated can mean a person who was shot and is in a hospital, not able to conduct his duties, or somebody who's gaga. And so you can see why the Republicans, look, the Republicans are doing something that if I were in their shoes, I would do as well, which is make as much out of Her's report as you possibly can. And what logically follows from Her's report is, if this guy is a dithering old man who should not be prosecuted, isn't it somewhat problematic that this dithering old man is the president of the United States? How does that square?
I feel like there is.
How does that square? And so, of course, they're going to invoke the 25th Amendment.
And so we have the 25th Amendment being invoked, and then what is the amendment? What is it? Is it the Civil War? Is 14th Amendment that they're trying to get against Trump?
Yes.
Which is about insurrection.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
And so
this was designed to keep people like Robert E. Lee from running for president.
And so, I just got to ask, since I asked about the 25th, what do you think about this? And go on whatever record you want to. What do you think about the 14th Amendment argument when it comes to Trump? I just got to get your opinion.
Well, look, I have to say, and I'm sorry if this is going to lead to my banishment from your program, but I have to say, I know that's a pretty low standard.
Yeah.
I have to say, if I were on the Supremes, I would say Colorado can't do that. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. There's a fundamental principle of due process of law that you're entitled to a hearing. We don't do pre-trial sentencing.
Right.
And the Magna Carta is about 800 years old. Due process comes out of the Magna Carta, and we've always taken it seriously. And so for a court to say, Trump, you can't run for president, and by the way, you're not going to get a hearing in any event, I just find that just doesn't work. So as I said, I would, if I were on the Supremes, do the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
even that idea of being unfit for office versus being because it doesn't say anything about running for office, right? I mean, I know that's maybe, I don't know, that's like splitting hairs, but it is like, can you actually keep someone from running?
How do you keep someone from running? Shackle him in his house?
Yeah, I mean, that to your point, exactly. Yeah, I mean, how do you, because anyone can, quote unquote, run for president, right? If they meet the certain constitutional requirements.
Even if they don't meet the constitutional standards, they can run. What's stopping them?
I guess that's true.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that if every election, there are some people put their dog's name in for president as a write-in. Nothing prevents that.
Right.
So if somebody put in the name of a disqualified person, it would be ignored, just like Fido's name would be ignored.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, how much do you think the deep state had to do with the writing of this report?
Yeah, nice cheesy question.
Sorry, I had to ask because I mean they're responsible for all the investigations against Trump. I mean, I figured there was like I don't know what the antithesis of the deep state would be like.
No, it's the deep state as a conspiracy with the Masons and some of the other international organizations, right?
Don't forget the Dead Sea Scrolls. They had something to do with it too.
And Opus Dei.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's commerce.
It's the shallow state.
The deep state is a metaphor for. I'm not entirely clear what it's a metaphor of. I think it means people who live in Washington or the surrounding area and work for the government. And her is certainly part of the deep state, but anybody doing anything in national politics is part of the deep state. So I don't really understand what that means, or therefore what your question is.
I think he's just being silly on that one.
It was just tongue in cheek.
He's just being, So I do, and I really, number one, I love talking with you. I haven't had this much fun in a while. The second thing is that we have this election coming up, right? We're looking at these two candidates. Looks like there's I said it was some report that I heard over half Democrats are concerned about President Biden, and they're concerned about him coming up, and they're 70 something. They're throwing these poll numbers out.
Yep.
Poll numbers can be argued and all that, right?
Yep.
It's a large number. So I'm just like, what do you think? How are you feeling about this upcoming election season? What are you most concerned about as we're moving into this?
I'm seriously depressed about it. I was of age when Nixon was running for the millionth time back in '68, and of course was opposed to him, and then later, of course, when he ran again. But this is the worst. To me, this is the worst dilemma for a voter that I've experienced. I mean, my own, just to be clear, I would vote for Bozo the Clown in opposition to former President Trump. And I say that only because I think he's unfit for office in every respect. And, you saw his NATO statements yesterday.
Oh, yeah. They don't pay. Right. Do whatever you want with them.
Exactly. I found that unbelievable. But at the same time, I am concerned about President Biden's mental acuity, and I think all of us should be.
Yeah, I was telling my wife recently that even though it would be super chaotic, I mean, he could always at the convention just say, "Hey, I'm not going to run, and instead you should, vote for Gretchen Whitmer or whoever it is." So,
you're making a really interesting point. One of I think a truly fundamental problem with Washington is none of these people knows when it's time to retire. If you take Justice Ginsburg, RBG, all the kids love her and everything. Yeah, great. She retired such that we end up having, a person of a very different judicial view in her place. And there's a great line by de Gaulle that the graveyards are full of indispensable people. And the fact is, it's very hard for Supreme Court justices to retire. There are a few, I've known a few who did it gracefully, but very, very few. And that's really unfortunate, but it's understandable. You call up, you get your secretary at the last minute to call up for reservations for 4 at the hottest restaurant in D.C. No problem. Yes, Mr. Justice. No, Mr. Justice. Whatever you want, Mr. Justice. And that's a kind of, in some ways, sort of a sick worldview. I'm so important that the world can't do without me.
Yeah, no kidding. So, Robert, my last question is more or less just what else about the report really kind of stuck out to you that we didn't already discuss, and what do you think that this kind of portends for the future of classified material handling?
Yeah, I've given that some thought. I think kind of the rules of the road are really going to change. The way it's been done in the past, because we trusted people, fools that we are. We trusted people to, when they were taking the presidential or vice presidential papers, so that they could look through them and, relive old glories and then send them on to some university someplace. I expect that from now on, somebody's going to go through those looking for candy stripes. I just expect that. I mean, I think it's, in many respects, I don't understand it. When I left NSA, about the only thing I took with me was I probably had a picture of my wife and kids somewhere, on my desk. And I might have stolen some pens, or maybe a yellow pad or two. But the notion of sort of packing up my papers for my biographer, I mean, ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Were those yellow pads filled with all the notes from Biden?
Yes,
and Obama?
Exactly. With doodles on them. I mean, those, when I used to listen to these classified briefings, I just doodled. Hey, this is interesting. Dab, doodle, doodle, doodle.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know I said that was going to be my last question, but what do you think the odds are of Obama having classified documents at his home?
I'd say they're very high.
Yeah, me too. I mean, because it's all a culture thing, right?
Next.
Like, if you have a culture of not wanting to take care of classified documents, like that's going to be somewhat systemic, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And presidents and vice presidents have always been treated differently. What a shock.
Yeah.
If you think that they're not like you and me, you're exactly right. They aren't. So get over it.
Well, I will. And on that note, thanks again, Robert, for joining us. This is
It's a pleasure.
Fun chat. And I'll try not to remind you that you're on the show the next time I reach out to you. I'll make it a surprise.
Great.
Be like, you haven't met me before, but
take care.
All right, thanks so much, and we'll see our audience. See you guys next time. Take care.
Very good.
Bye.